Welcome back. They're the men and women you trust to make decisions about your health. But your own doctor could be hiding a secret that impacts their judgment. We're talking about physicians allowed to continue practicing while battling the demon of addiction on the job. The 7 on Your Side I-Team found it happens more often than you'd think. They've dug through discipline records for local doctors struggling with drug and alcohol abuse, discovering that some are allowed to keep practicing, and they don't have to share their struggle with you, even though it could impact your health.
It is and should be an outrage, but the public has really been kept in the dark.
Tonight at 11, the ABC 7 I-Team uncovers the secrets that you should know about local doctors. And 7 on Your Side I-Team investigator Josie Sermon is here now to give us a preview. This is tough stuff, and I suspect that easy answers are not going to be easy to find. How frequently are our doctors battling these tough type of addictions that we know are quite prevalent in society as a whole?
Absolutely. There's nothing different from doctors than anybody else. So they're just as regular as the rest of us are, dealing with the same problems that all of us have, except of course they have better access to prescriptions. That could be a problem, and an extremely stressful job. So anyone would tell you that puts them at risk. But what we found, that we're talking about thousands of doctors here in the DMV, and it's a small percentage of them that end up in these programs that are essentially not run by the state but coordinated by the state. So just in Virginia and Maryland alone, we found more than 200 doctors involved in these programs. They're not necessarily, they don't call them rehab programs in every situation, but that's essentially what they are. They're a state monitoring program in Maryland and Virginia where they're watching the doctors. Sometimes they're admitted on their own. Other times they're admitted as a result of failures on the job that leave the state no choice but to say, hey, we're going to discipline you for this, and we're going to put you into this program so we can watch your behavior. But that does not always happen.
The tough public policy question, if you will, is how do we strike a balance? Because we want people who have these issues to come forward and get help, because we know that you can overcome an addiction. It's a lifelong challenge, but it can be done. So we don't want to set up a situation where people are encouraged to keep everything secret and not seek help. But if you, if one of us or a family member, is someone listening, is going to a doctor who could be impaired, it feels like there's a right to know involved there.
Absolutely, and that is not the policy right now. When these doctors are involved in these programs that are facilitated by the state, they have no obligation to say anything to you. The programs themselves are confidential until there is some sort of disciplinary action. So if a doctor does something on the job, is caught, is recorded basically by the state, then they have to disclose that in the public disciplinary records that anyone can access. But we find most times people don't necessarily know where they are. So there is a call from public health advocates saying, listen, this is information we need to know about. We need to know if our doctor is potentially impaired, because what the health experts would say is that there's the potential for relapse. So we're talking about people who are making life and death decisions. On the flip side, people who have done extensive treatment research, and you'll hear about this tonight at 11, say they've done extensive studies looking at hundreds of doctors in recovery, and they've seen incredible success rates that say there's no problem, in part because these physicians get the kind of treatment that other people dealing with this don't. Airline pilots and physicians get better monitoring and scrutiny and treatment than any other profession in the country when it comes to drug addiction and alcoholism. The experts on that side will tell you they can be rehabilitated, can be safely on the job once they're physically stable and out of just the addiction phase, the detox phase. Then they feel they can go back on the job because there is monitoring. On the flip side, the public health advocates would say, listen, we need to know this information. Right now, there is no one that's going to tell you that, especially if they're only in the confidential program by choice.
And in all likelihood, the policy varies by location, probably state by state, maybe even county by county, who knows. But where you live impacts what the rules of the road are.
Absolutely. We found for the most part across the country these programs are confidential because they want to protect the doctor's right to some privacy. And that's the fundamental problem, is patients, if you ask advocates, have a right to know this information so that they can make the decision. If they're comfortable with it, that's fine. You know, we all know that people can recover from alcoholism and addiction, no problem. But the advocates would say you have the right to know that information. Right now, depending on the state, chances are you're not, unless you know how to dig for it specifically. And we're going to show you that on ABC 7 as well.
We're just scratching the surface here. What will people see tonight at 11 on WJLA?
We're going to show you some of the documents that we've pulled, some of the, unfortunately, horror stories of what can go wrong and what you really don't know about as a patient unless you go in and look at these discipline records that detail in the finest detail what these doctors have been involved with. We'll talk about the experts and why they say there's a need for a little bit more transparency in the process, and we'll also talk to people on the flip side who basically say these people can be rehabilitated, they can be a service to the community, we should not hold them back from the job, even though, you know, there's an argument there.
Doctors Under the Influence. It is an ABC 7 On Your Side I-Team investigation. Investigator Josie Sermon doing the legwork to bring this information to us. It's tonight at 11 on our sister station, ABC 7 WJLA. We'll be watching. Josie, thanks very much for the time.
Thanks for
the preview. Always great having you here.
Thank you.
We'll step aside. Back with more News Talk in a moment.